Those are going to be immediate. So I'm going to stop sharing this and get back to my presentation. But yeah, that's exactly what we think of when we think of stress, right? We think of this state of worry or mental tension caused by a difficult situation. We think something that usually we want to minimize or avoid. And I can tell you that all of those things in the chat or in the word cloud are definitely things that we would want to avoid, or even reading those out or looking at the word cloud. It kind of does like bring that kind of tension or overwhelm a little bit too, just reading those words. We also often think of stress as something that happens to us. So something that's kind of out of our control, something that just happens that we just have to learn to deal with, or that is creating and causing these physiological or physical and emotional responses within us. And it's also something that we can think of that arises when something that we care about is at stake. So when we have something like a big presentation and our job depends on it, or a really big life event that could be positive or could be more on the negative side, that can cause stress within us. And that's sometimes when we think of stress, we think of those things that something big is at stake, whether it's money, a job, our family, that we have to kind of combat stress or battle stress to get through, to hold on to that thing that we really care about. And while all of these are part of stress, like I had said in the beginning, that's not the only way we can think about stress. And so today we're really going to dive deep into what stress really means, how it does affect the body and the mind, and how we can embrace stress in a more productive way. So I want you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable and just think back to a recent time that was really stressful, a really stressful situation or event. Don't worry about sharing it in the chat. This is just kind of for you to reflect. And even when we did the word cloud, you may have been thinking about a specific time or a specific event, but think back to that time, put yourself back in that situation, think about all the details, what was going on, what happened, think about that situation, and then really note how you felt during that situation and what you were thinking and what were you feeling. I'm gonna give you like just a minute or two to put yourself back in that situation. Usually it's pretty easy to think of this kind of stressful situation because those more negative feelings, if that's kind of where your mind went, is they're more prominent in our minds because that's when we feel kind of at danger. And so our brains are going to remind us of those situations a little easier than something that may be more positive. So hold on to that feeling that you were having during that stressful situation. Hold on to those thoughts that you may be recalling, and even note how you're feeling now. When you're recalling that situation, you may feel like you're back in that stressful situation and all of those feelings are arising again. And so depending on your situation, depending on how you already view stress, you may be feeling what we typically call the fight or flight response. So the fight or flight response is pretty well known. So this may be a review for a lot of people, but we're going to go through more in depth how the fight or flight response, or how we think about stress in this way, does really affect our physical and psychological response within our body. And so this may be familiar to you, and like I said, it may be easy to definitely recall those situations where you felt these responses. So when we are in this fight or flight response and we feel like we're in this stressful situation, we're automatically going to feel some of these responses no matter what is going on. So our pupils might dilate, we might start sweating a little bit more, our breathing increases, our heart rate increases. All of those are going to help deliver more oxygen, fat, and sugar to our muscles and our brain, because the fight or flight response is at its core, quite literally, to either help us fight or flee from this threat or this challenge that comes our way. And so when we think of stress, we think of stress as that threat on our lives, on our body, the things that we have that are important to us. And so our body is just automatically getting ourselves ready to fight or run away from this stress or this threat. So our body is trying to help us in these situations. A couple other things that happen: cortisol release, so it increases our blood pressure, our blood sugar, while also kind of decreasing or depressing our immune system. Our adrenaline is increased, and more adrenaline is released to increase our strength to fight or flight or flee. Our muscles may tense up to get ourselves ready to go. Our brain gets our body ready for action, which can prevent sleep. Our liver releases glucose for muscle fuel. Digestion might slow or even stop to conserve energy, so that we are able to use all the energy we need to fight or flee. Urination production stops or slows. And then oxygen, nutrients, and blood flow can be shunted to our muscles because our bodies are just trying to hold on to those resources that we may need in the future. And so if we are in physical danger and we really do need to fight or run away, this, you can see, is helpful, right? But if we're in that stressful situation that you may have recalled when I asked you to, or we're experiencing a stressful situation at work, and or I'm giving a presentation and it's a stressful thing because I'm talking to 100 people, but these physical and psychological responses aren't necessarily going to help us in the moment. And so when we're in this fight or flight state for quite a long time, that's when we think of, that's when we have those negative stress effects. And that's where a lot of people take their presentations or how they talk about stress to reduce stress, to avoid stress, to do something to combat stress so that you can relax and not have this fight or flight response. And while those, of course, are super helpful, this is kind of an old way of thinking. And so an old way of thinking about stress. Stress isn't the fight or flight response isn't the only way that our body can respond to stress. And so while some of these things may happen automatically because our body just cannot discern between a stressful event that happens at work and meeting a bear in the woods, stress has evolved, and our body response has evolved to mean so much more than just fight or flight. And so there are other stress responses that you may or may not have heard of that are not as talked about, but they can be helpful. So we have that fight or flight. We also have excite and delight. So when we're met with a stressor or stressful situation that isn't that classic kind of stress that we defined in the beginning, we are more open to stress. We can feel excited and happy about this stressful situation. We're able to use that energy that stress can produce for more, for a better outcome. We may be more curious about this situation. And there are also the physiological response compared to fight or flight is a little healthier and less intense. So our body in this excite and delight response can release a little bit of cortisol and adrenaline, but it can be a little more balanced, so you feel more alert and aware as you do than in that fight or flight response. So we can think of this excite and delight as something that may have a similar effect on our body as fight or flight, but it's tamped down a little bit, and we can use that energy a little bit more than that like frantic fight or flight response. And so for an example, excite and delight, think of like a really stressful like football game. I know we are not a stranger to those at all. Something that's really fun to watch, but it is kind of that stressful situation. Your heart rate increases, your adrenaline is going, and you're feeling maybe some of those responses, but it's in a good way. If you really like extreme sports like skydiving or traveling to a new place, those are all the stressful situations or the responses that we can think of when we think of that excite and delight. And I can see the chat. Yes, absolutely. Like getting butterflies, if that's kind of how your body responds to any stressful situation, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're stressed in a bad way. Yeah, absolutely. And then we also have a tend and befriend response. So tend and befriend is when we perceive a person or a community that we care about needs help. So again, this response can create that physical reaction in our body, like a release of actually oxytocin and serotonin, which is a little bit different than that fight or flight or excite and delight response, but it still elicits some kind of response. And it's just more of a coming together and reaching out to people. So when we see some kind of crisis, small or large, we always see community coming together and supporting. And while the situation is not positive, it does have more of a useful or positive outcome based on that stress, because of the way our body responds to this type of stress. And so while we think of stress, like we're talking about, we either think of stress as harmful or bad and something to avoid, or we can think of stress as harmful or as helpful and enhancing, because there are other ways our body responds to stress, and there are other ways that we can think about stress that will help us. There are so many things that do cause stress or create stress, like we had talked about in the beginning. And so instead of trying to avoid stress or reduce that stress, we're going to talk about how to embrace that stress and think about stress in a more helpful way, because there are so many other sources of stress out there, and it really is impossible to try to avoid stress. And that's not the goal. And we'll talk about that in just a bit too, and how stress can actually help you in having a more fulfilling life or learning more. And so when we think of the stress mindset, we want to shift our mindset from that stress is harmful, stress is something I want to avoid, into stress is enhancing. Stress is something that I can deal with. I have the resources to deal with. Because that kind of response is going to energize us for action without actually harming our health. Like we talked about in that fight or flight, if we're in that chronic stress like state where our body is responding in that fight or flight way, even at a minor level for a long time, we can see how it might affect our sleep, our digestion, our energy levels, our ability to concentrate and focus and maintain our relationships if we're in that state for a really long time. And so this stress is harmful, stress is enhancing kind of mindset measure is based off of Dr. Aaliyah Crum and her colleagues' work. They actually created an 8-item kind of questionnaire that you can take to to just kind of figure out how you're thinking about stress and the mindset you have around stress, and whether you kind of gravitate toward stress is enhancing or stress is harmful or debilitating. But essentially, we're not going to do that today. Essentially, this stress measurement says that if you're thinking about stress in a harmful way, and stress is something that we really need to avoid, we think that stress depletes my health and my vitality. Stress debilitates my performance and productivity. Stress inhibits my learning and my growth. And the effects of stress are negative and should be avoided. And so if you're kind of nodding your head along with these, just note that. If you're kind of like, yes, this is exactly what I think, or this is how I live, note that this is maybe more the way you're thinking about stress, and something that we will talk about how to shift toward that stress is enhancing. But as we're thinking about these things, how we think actually dictates and informs our actions. So if we're thinking stress depletes my health, and hurts my performance and productivity, it inhibits my learning and my growth, I'm not going to seek out things that I think are stressful or will be stressful because I think it's going to hurt my health. It's going to hurt my growth and learning. It's going to hurt my performance and productivity at work. And I should avoid them at all costs. When in reality, stress can be enhancing. Stress can improve health and vitality, improve performance and productivity, can facilitate learning and growth. And those effects can be positive and should be utilized. So if we have the choice to think about stress in a more productive way and thinking about stress in an enhancing way, and we can think about stress as these points to be true, then it can also inform how we act or how we challenge ourselves. If we put ourselves in a safe but challenging situation that may cause some stress, but we think that stress is enhancing, we can potentially grow more and learn more and be healthier and take risks and do the things we really want to do because we feel like, yes, they may be stressful, but it's going to be good in the long run. And this is kind of where we want to line up today in that challenge response versus that threat response. Stress is a threat. Stress is a challenge. We want to think about stress as a challenge. And I see in the chat, we've got some people talking. Sonia said, yes, I'm always stressed. And I think that really sums it up too, that while we're trying our best to do what we can to get the things done we need to, and we're not always seeking out stress. Stress just tries to find us, and if we can kind of shift our mindset into that stress is enhancing, we are going to be well equipped for a more productive and healthy life. And so the first thing I want to talk about with shifting that mindset into that stress is enhancing this challenge response is that it truly is all about perspective. How we think about stress right now is a culmination of all of our experiences, all the things that we've read, all the people that we've gone, that we know, that we spend time with. It's how they think about stress too. And so the mindset that we have around stress right now is learned, which means that we can also learn another way to think about stress. And so there are a lot of other things that we learn that we have really strong thoughts about. And so in the chat, I am going to put up a couple slides where I just want you to choose one or the other for these next couple slides. And I think it'll probably be pretty easy to decide, but then we'll go through and talk about how it relates to stress. But really take your time and think about which one you'll choose and just drop it in the chat. So are you a digital planner or a paper planner? And I just lost my chat. Here we go. Okay. So I see more people saying paper. I'm a digital planner as well. Okay, that was pretty quick. Some people say both. Both. Okay. There's a lot of people that say both, actually, which is interesting. Just managing both is extra work, I guess, but it works. Okay, great. Next, oops. Morning or afternoon meetings? Do you like your morning meetings or your afternoon meetings a little more? If you could have your choice. I know a lot of us don't have a choice sometimes. Morning. Oh, I see a lot of mornings. Afternoon. Afternoon, but before 3. Yes, Sarah. Morning with a chai latte. I'm coming to that meeting for sure. Okay, awesome. Next, do you put your cereal in your milk in your bowl first and then pour the milk? Or do you do milk and then cereal? Cereal. Cereal first. Yes, I think this one people have very oh, I see a milk first. It was very hard to find a picture of just a bowl of milk. So I think that tells you that most people will think cereal first. All right, next. Are you more of a beach vacation or a mountain vacation? I see a lot of beach, some mountains. This one was hard for me to choose. I like both. Um, I think because now we're in the summer, I'll choose mountains to get a little cooler. Depends on how stressed I am. Yes, Jenna. Okay, couple more. For your movies or your shows, do you like predictable plot or like a twist ending? Yep. I'm much more of a twist ending person too. Those Hallmark movies are nice to wind down, but sometimes they're a little too predictable. All right. Crunchy or smooth peanut butter? Okay, can you all hear me? I think I'm frozen. Maybe?
I
Okay,
can
there we go.
still hear you.
Okay. Do we have anyone for crunchy or smooth peanut butter?
I think I've only seen like 3 or 4.
Okay, I don't see any at all. That's weird. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Just taking a little bit um to load, I guess. Okay. Last one, and this one is going to be for how you like to wind down. When we typically think of stress, we're thinking of that, like, how do I de-stress kind of thing. Quiet time or social time? Do you like to be like a little more reflective and introspective, or you like to reach out to people and have that like social interaction? Quiet. Yeah, quiet. Quiet depends on the day. Yeah, I think that's fair for pretty much everything. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for playing. That stuff is always really fun because most of the time people have really strong opinions about one or the other. And it just goes back to what we were talking about before. And these things are stuff that when we have opinions, we learn based on experience. So for those times where we we love a morning meeting, or we really prefer an afternoon meeting. We know that because typically we've had both, and we know that we're either more productive in the morning or we're more productive in the afternoon. We know that we like to have a beach vacation over a mountain vacation because we may have been to both, or we really like the mountains and we don't love the sand. And so all of these are going to be based on your experiences, and the how you were raised and the things that you learned along the way, up until now. Same thing with how you kind of deal with stress. Most people liked their quiet time. I think it definitely depends on the day, but if you were to choose one over the other, most people were really quick to say, I really like my quiet time. I really like that introspection. I really like that kind of time for myself. And you really truly only know that because you've been there before. You've been in those situations. You've been in that time where you felt like that's exactly what you needed, and you took that and you knew it worked for you. And so we can think about this kind of stress mindset shift in the same way. It's all about that perspective and how we react to certain things and how we act, and it informs us how we like to live our lives. And so when we are faced with stress, and we think of stress as that debilitating or harmful situation or event, we may try to avoid it or reduce it because that's just what we've been taught. That's what we've been taught. That's what we've learned. That's what we've been told. But avoiding that stress or trying to dampen that stress when it comes can actually become more stressful because you're adding more onto your plate, or the avoiding of stress when that's not technically possible is just building on that stress a little bit more. So when we think of accepting that stress and learning that, yes, this stress is here, I can't avoid it, it's going to happen anyway, it's real, but I have the plan, I have the mindset, and I have the tools I know I can use to overcome that stress or change that stress into something that is going to be more positive, and you can grow in that way. And so we want to adopt more of a challenge response in the face of stress. So while stress is harmful and stress is helpful, can both be true. We want to try to aim ourselves more toward that challenge response and viewing stress or anxiety as excitement, energy, or motivation, especially when we have that physiological response with our butterflies or our heart rate increases, we start sweating a little bit more. We can first think of that stress as, okay, this is energy. It's just energy flowing through me. This doesn't mean that I'm in this fight or flight already. We can also think of stress as, how is this happening for me? How is this situation helping me in the future versus why is this happening to me? So when we talked about what stress really is, oftentimes we think of stress as happening to you, or you being put into a situation that you have absolutely no control over. And that really does create that like helplessness, or just not being confident in your ability to actually do something about the situation, or work with the stress in a way that you really do have in your mind, and in your toolbox. And so if we think of stress as something that's happening for you, and having a slight optimistic frame on that within reason, that is going to help a lot with that challenge response. That's one of the first things that we can think of to put ourselves in that more of a challenge response. And then it also can be helpful to build awareness of how stress shows up and your typical response. So just like we did in the very beginning, thinking about what we associate with stress, and then thinking back to a certain stressful situation that recently happened, and doing that a couple times will help build awareness of how you typically respond in a stressful situation, and also what your body responds like. You may or may not already know, depending on the situations you've been in the past, and how how comfortable you are with that reflection to begin with. But that's a really good place to start too, building that awareness of how stress shows up or how it typically shows up. And you can think of work in one box and life in another box. You can think about it as just in general your life, whatever you kind of gravitate toward. But that's a really helpful way to think of stress that'll help you shift more into that challenge response and using that mindset to face stress and work with stress. And there's also such a thing as stress inoculation, where we can learn physically and mentally from stress. And so this kind of goes along with that challenge response as well. And how we think of stress will help us in the future not only deal with stressful situations, but learn and grow from them as well. And so with this challenge response, if we're thinking about the stress response, the threat response, and the challenge response, we have two ways to think, and two ways that our body reacts, basically. So when we're in that threat situation, we're thinking stress is harmful. More simply, our body is going to restrict our blood flow, which increases inflammation and immobilizes those immune cells. Our minds can create some fear and anger, self-doubt and shame. And we can also be more vigilant of things that aren't going well. That's confirmation bias. So when we're in a stressful situation, we're automatically going to be when we're in a stressful situation and we're thinking of the stressful situation as a threat, we're automatically going to be thinking of all the things that could go wrong, or the things that aren't going well feel a lot heavier and less manageable than if we were to think of stress in another way. So these body changes or responses to thinking of stress as a threat can accelerate aging and create more of a risk of any kind of disease. And so when we think of the challenge response, stress is enhancing, stress is a challenge that I have the ability to overcome or work with, that actually, even just thinking that will maximize blood flow. Your blood vessels will relax a little bit more, and your heart beats stronger. So maybe it's not beating slower, but it's a little more effective and efficient at creating more blood flow. And then within your thoughts and psychologically, you may feel more or think more excitedly, energized, enthusiastic, and confident that you have the ability to overcome or deal with whatever situation you're in at the moment. And then your attention is more focused and open and ready to engage, like we had talked about for that exciting delight stage or response of stress. We're more open and curious about what's going to happen versus expecting something to go wrong. And this kind of response, this challenge response, is going to help us. It's good for longevity. We'll have more energy and more blood flow. Our heartbeat is stronger. That is not going to age us as much or put us at as much of a risk for disease as this stress is a threat response. So now we'll get into how do we actually shift our mindset? What are the things that we can do now that we understand the physiological, the physical, the psychological, or the mental responses that we could potentially have in both mindsets? It's always important to understand how, so you can actually practice it. Because like we talked about, it's something that we can definitely learn how to do. So a couple things here. When we focus on the resources that can help us shift from that threat to challenge mindset. We feel like we have the confidence and we're able to focus on the things that are within our control. And so these resources really come in handy when we're thinking about the actions that we need to take to deal with a stressful situation. So we can focus on the strengths that we have individually. We can focus on the things that the strengths we have as a group, depending on the situation. We can think about our preparation or the things we do really well or we know how to do or that we prepared and planned for that'll help you get through that stress. Focusing on your confidence, previous experiences, support from others, and your own stress response are all really great resources. That last one is kind of like a meta example of resources. So your stress response can be your resource. So just reminding yourself that you have the ability to choose how you respond to the stress. While you can't avoid the stress to begin with, and while you wish you may not be in the stressful situation, your stress response and the ability to decide how you respond to it can absolutely be a resource to build your confidence and help you take action toward whatever you are having to deal with. You can also connect your stress to your own values. So when we think about motivation, a lot of times we think of motivation as something you either have or you don't have. You're either motivated to work out or you're not. You're motivated to go to work or you're not. But motivation is actually on a spectrum. So one day we may be really motivated by the work that we do and the impact that we have on employees or students or the world in general. And then one day we might be really motivated to go to work just because we need money for a trip that we have coming up. And while both are really great, the motivation that we have from making a difference, if that's really important to us, that motivation is going to be a lot stronger long term. Money only goes so far. Winning a t-shirt only goes so far, unless it's a Wellbama t-shirt. But if we can connect whatever we do to our values, that is going to allow us to connect not just the situation that we're in that stressful state, but to allow us to understand how it affects our life in the future or how it connects to something greater than that one specific situation. So knowing your values, knowing what you value, whether it's family or adventure, freedom, health, anything that you value, if you can connect this stressful situation to what you value, that's going to allow you to kind of shift your mindset from this everything that I value is at stake to everything that I value is safe, but can also help me get through this stressful situation and take action toward overcoming that stress. We can also practice mindfulness. So really being in the moment and accepting the stress because like I keep saying, stress is inevitable. We cannot avoid it. We cannot decrease it sometimes, but allowing yourself to be in the moment, being present, whether or not you want to take a couple moments to take a few deep breaths, which is a de-stress technique, super helpful, super important to have those techniques. But in the moment, that's really great. It's not going to help you long term with that mindset shift, but practicing mindfulness and allowing yourself to be where you are, accept the stress for what it is, and pull on your resources or your values will help you feel like you have that confidence to shift your mindset toward, yes, stress is good. I have the ability to overcome whatever stress or situation I have, even if it isn't positive. And there are certain things that in the moment are really helpful. And then lastly, breaking that stress generation cycle. So I alluded to this a little earlier in the presentation, but our brain loves a target. So if we give our brain any kind of target to focus on, it will automatically think of or focus on that thing. So for example, you've all probably heard of the don't think of a pink elephant example. So what are you thinking about now? A pink elephant, because that's what I said. And you're telling yourself, don't think of it, don't think of it. But really all you're doing is thinking of that pink elephant. And so the same thing with stress. If we continually hear or tell ourselves, don't be stressed, avoid stress, I need to de-stress, but I'm always stressed. Even saying that right now, I'm like, that's stressful. So being able to break that cycle of I'm trying to avoid stress, but I already have the stress, or I'm getting more stress and I can't avoid the stress. So now I don't have the confidence to deal with the stress, and it can just keep going in that circle. That's a really hard cycle to break. But being aware that you have those other options, you have this way of shifting your mindset or thinking about stress in a better way will absolutely help break that cycle and help you in the future when that cycle could come back. And so I'll leave you with a couple things, but I always like to say like, happy lives are not stress-free, and stress-free does not guarantee happiness. We don't know what a happy life is unless we have something to compare it to. And so, while happiness doesn't mean that it's all stress-free, it's good to have that stress in our lives because one can deal with it. It is good for learning and growing and development and our confidence. And it's also it's going to be there. And so we have to learn how to shift our mindset and live with it versus avoid it or decrease it in certain ways. And the last thing I'll say is that these are skills to work on. So all mental skills we can think of just like physical skills, whether you are someone who just started working out and you're just starting to build muscle or building that habit. It takes a lot of time and practice. Same thing with the things that you're really good at with work. It took a lot of time and practice for you to get really good at those things. And this is the same kind of thing. This mental shift will take time and it'll take some effort and reflection on your part. And it may take some going through these stressful situations and then reflecting back and thinking about, okay, how could I have pulled on my resources a little bit more, practice mindfulness in the moment to tell myself that this isn't actually the worst thing in the world and I can deal with it because stress can give me energy. That definitely takes practice. But if you can reflect after the fact, at least that's a really great start. And then building awareness of how you reflect or respond to stress is another really great way to start practicing. So this we have two other classes on the upside of stress, thinking about stress in different ways than you may have heard of stress being talked about. November 6th, we have a wellness webinar on contagious stress and connection. So that's really all about how stress can build connection. We'll dive deep into that tend and befriend response that we talked about in the beginning of the presentation. And then December 11th, find your stress edge, talking all about how to put yourself kind of at that limit to really grow and learn how you respond and what you can do to build your stress response in a really productive way. I would love to hear any questions that you have. You can type them in the chat. You can also take off mute and ask out loud if you'd like. Thank you. I'm glad you all enjoyed. Hopefully you took something or a couple things to learn from, even if it's just stress is not good. Stress is a good thing.
I do have our book winner if anybody is interested in knowing that. It is going to be Caroline Strawbridge.
Yay.
And I'll also share the title of the book in case anyone is interested in getting that one. So here, I picked this one out. So it's The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris.
It's a good book. All right. I see one question here. What is the best way to help your kids manage? I think probably just starting the conversation would be a really good start to stress. So you can talk to them about how stress shows up in their own body. There are some really good resources on Google. If you Google like body outline, you can even have them draw or like color in where they feel the most stress. I think they do have that awareness of, okay, I have like something in my stomach, like butterflies, or like tension in my head. If they can't verbalize it like that, that's a really good resource and a good like activity to do. And then that can help start the conversation on how stress shows up in your body and how you can kind of think of, okay, these butterflies aren't a bad thing. They're just your stress, your body's response.